Hey there, and welcome to Haunting Lullabies. I'm here to help you unwind and drift into the night with some spine-tingling stories. But before you settle in too comfortably, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe only if you truly enjoy what we do here. Don't forget to drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. It's amazing to feel like we're all part of a global community. A quick heads up. There will be a few ads in the first 15 minutes, but don't worry after that. It's all completely ad-free. I promise you won't want to miss what's coming next, because these stories are like no others. So, dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that cozy touch, and let's dive into tonight's haunting tale, The House That Listened. The rain had started before sunset, soft and persistent. A sound that filled the house like breath. Daniel sat in his car for a long time before stepping out, watching how the wipers dragged across the windshield in slow, tired arcs. The house looked smaller than he remembered. Maybe it was the light, or maybe memory had stretched its size over the years to make the past feel more significant. It had been 2 years since he'd last unlocked this door. 2 years since they carried Emma's body out through it. He killed the engine, the silence immediately devoured by the steady hiss of rain. The air smelled of salt and pine and something faintly metallic, the scent of old recording equipment. When he finally walked up the creaking porch steps, his hand hesitated on the doorknob. The key felt heavier than it should have. The house had always seemed to breathe differently when she was gone, like lungs that hadn't yet adjusted to the new rhythm of loss. Inside, the rooms waited with that peculiar stillness that only abandoned places know. Dust had settled in layers, softening the corners, muting color. He dropped his suitcase near the stairs and switched on the Procus, main breaker. The lights flickered reluctantly to life, casting the familiar living room in uneven amber. Everything was where he remembered. The dark oak shelves, the turntable, the framed photo of Emma, laughing with her hair whipped by sea wind. Only the air felt altered, thick with waiting. Daniel told himself this was just nostalgia, but nostalgia doesn't hum. He heard it faintly at first, a low electrical murmur that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards, like static caught in the walls. He followed it to the studio in the back, the one Emma had called her favorite room. The old reel-to-reel recorders lined the table, their metal cases dulled by dust. He ran a hand across them, feeling the fine grit gather on his fingertips. He powered one on. The machine came alive with a soft whir, reels spinning lazily until they found rhythm. The faint hiss of blank tape filled the air, comforting in its familiarity. But beneath that hiss, there was something else. A whisper, so faint it might have been imagined. He leaned closer. It wasn't words, not yet just the shape of them, syllables struggling through layers of static. Then, for the briefest moment, he heard his name. Daniel. He jerked back, nearly toppling the chair. The sound stopped instantly, leaving only the gentle hiss of tape. His heart hammered against his ribs. It couldn't be her voice. He had erased every recording of Emma after the funeral. Deleted, burned, shredded. He hadn't wanted her voice trapped anywhere. That had been the point. He stopped the reel and rewound it manually. The spools turned backward, whispering time in reverse. He pressed play again, breath held tight. Only rain, wind, static, nothing else. The whisper was gone, as if the machine had decided he wasn't ready to hear it twice. He told himself he was tired. Jet lag, nerves, the disorientation of returning to the scene of grief. He shut the machine off and turned toward the stairs. The sound followed, ism subtle, like an echo of footsteps half a second behind his own. When he stopped, it stopped. When he exhaled, it seemed to breathe with him. He didn't look back. The bedroom door at the end of the hall was half open. He hadn't left it that way. The window beyond it rattled softly from the wind off the sea. On the nightstand sat the small microphone Emma used to test frequencies. It was connected to a portable recorder, the same model she had used the night she died. He stared at it for a long time, trying to decide whether to pick it up or leave it untouched like an artifact. The small red indicator light blinked once, then again. Recording. Daniel's stomach turned cold. He hadn't touched it. He reached for the stop button, but froze when the speaker emitted a faint sound. A woman's breath, shallow, rhythmic, unmistakably real. He leaned in, unable to help himself. The breathing grew uneven, then cut off abruptly, replaced by a single line whispered with trembling softness. "I can't sleep, Dan. The house keeps listening." The recorder clicked off by itself. He stumbled backward, his calf hitting the edge of the bed. Every rational part of his mind fought to assemble explanations. Timed playback, residual battery charge, a corrupted file. Nothing fit. That recorder hadn't worked in 2 years. He had packed it away after her death, certain the memory card had been destroyed with the rest. Rain drummed against the glass, relentless and patient. He reached for the bedside lamp and stopped halfway. A soft hum pulsed through the floorboards again, the same frequency he had heard downstairs. It moved beneath him, slow and deliberate, like something mapping the contours of the house. The microphone on the nightstand twitched slightly, turning toward him without being touched. He forced a laugh that sounded like someone else's voice. "Good trick," he muttered. Faulty wiring, maybe interference. But even as he said it, the rain outside began syncing with the hum, small vibrations aligning, rhythm steadying until it almost resembled breathing. Slow inhale, slow exhale. The house was matching him, listening. He grabbed the recorder and pressed play again. The tape spun, hissing softly. Nothing but the hum of the room. Then the same voice returned, quiet but closer. "Don't stay here, Daniel. Please." He dropped the device. It clattered against the wood floor, the battery cover skidding beneath the bed. The light flickered once, twice, then held steady. The air felt thick enough to swallow sound. He could hear his own heartbeat, and beneath it, faintly, another. He stepped out into the hallway, breath quickening. Behind him, the recorder started again on its own. Emma's voice repeating the same words, softer each time. "Don't stay here. Don't stay here. Don't." Until it faded into static, and the gentle, steady rhythm of breathing filled the house once more. The next morning tasted like dust and salt. Daniel woke on the couch because the bedroom felt like a mouth closing around him when he tried to sleep there. The house had its own temperature, cooler than the weather should have allowed, and every sound felt too close to his skin. He brewed coffee with hands that still shook and stood at the window watching rain erase the horizon. The sea looked like a graphite sheet, the kind Emma used to darken with the side of her pencil before scratching light out of it with a blade. He told himself to leave, pack the suitcase, lock the door, drive until the rain turned to a different kind of weather. But the studio light was on. He hadn't left it that way. He found the door ajar, a sliver of gold cutting across the hallway floor. Inside, one of the reel-to-reel machines had begun to spin. No tape threaded, just metal wheels turning like a heartbeat with no veins to pump through. The air in the room had shifted. It smelled like solder and pine resin, and the faint sweetness of Emma's shampoo, the scent that clung to the cushions for months after she was gone. He crossed to the drawers beneath the workbench. Emma had kept everything meticulous coils labeled with dates and locations, cassette cases with handwritten tags, a logbook with her tidy annotations. He pulled the logbook out and flipped until he reached the final entries. The last page was dated 3 nights before she died. A sketch of the floor plan covered the page, detailed to the inch. Beside each room, she had written a frequency range and the phrase, resonance node. The bedroom was circled 3 times, underlined hard enough to indent the page beneath. In the margin, she had scrawled, "It answers when it wants to. I think the house isn't just reflecting, it's remembering." The back of his neck prickled. He turned to the wall where Emma had hung a string map months earlier, connecting thumbtacks with thread to show how sound traveled through the structure. She had added pins after he left. The red thread webbed heavily around the bedroom and the studio, then strangled the hallway between them like a noose. Next to the kitchen pin, she'd taped a scrap of paper, 9:41 p.m. The walls exhale. Dan didn't hear it. He shut the logbook and told himself not to read that line again. The rain pressed on the roof, soft, steady pressure. The house seemed to listen to the rain until it could imitate the rhythm. He powered down the spinning machine, but the hum continued for a few beats, as if the machine needed time to accept what he'd asked. The landline rang. The sound made him jump so hard he knocked a pencil cup off the table. It clattered against the floor, scattering erasers like pale teeth. He stared at the phone until the second ring, then answered. "You're there." Mara's voice, careful, like stepping onto thin ice. Emma's sister never called without purpose. "I needed to pick up a few things," he said. He hadn't planned to tell anyone. He'd come. "I won't stay long." A pause. "You said that last time." Another pause, then softer. "Did you hear it yet?" "Hear what?" "The breathing. Mom thinks it's the sea." "I know the sea. This wasn't the sea." He swallowed. The word was an anchor in his throat. "We're not doing this, Mara." "We are. Because I was in that house the day before she..." The sentence shook. She breathed once, steadier when she spoke again. "I heard something standing in the hall. Like Emma was sleeping 2 rooms away even though she was at the table. It's in the walls, Dan. Or the walls are in it." A scrape of sound, like she was adjusting the phone against her collar. If it starts playing things you don't want played, you should leave." He almost told her about the recorder, about Emma warning him not to stay. Instead, he said, "I'm fine. You never told me what really happened," she said. "No accusation, just weathered patience." "You said she stopped breathing." "That's what you said. That's what happened." Another pause. "Emma wrote me 2 days before she died. Said the house was taking in too much, like a lung that couldn't exhale." Mara's voice gentled. "If you hear something that sounds like her, ask yourself whether it's the house or the memory. Then ask which one is worse." The line clicked softly as she hung up. The dial tone bloomed like a flat line. He replaced the receiver and stared at the wall until the steadying motion of dust in a shaft of light calmed his hands. He needed structure. If the house held sound like water, he'd map its currents. He brought in 3 condenser microphones, a portable interface, and a laptop scabbed with old project stickers. He placed 1 mic at the bedroom threshold, 1 in the studio near the real machines, and 1 in the middle of the hall between them. He checked levels, set a low noise gate, added a gentle high shelf to drag voices out of the rain. The monitors remained silent, but the meters tickled at the bottom room tone, the sigh of old wood, a whisper of rain like sheets being shaken out. He hit record. The software began to carve sound into light. At first, it was nothing. 40 minutes of rain, the occasional creak like a ship turning in sleep. He fast-forwarded through the waveform, looking for anything sudden, any strange geometry in the spectrum. At 31 minutes, the hallway mic fluttered, a small lift in amplitude. He scrubbed back and played it at normal speed. Footfall, single, soft. A second one, closer. He held still, the hairs on his arms high and stupid. "Hello?" He called into the space, then regretted it. The house absorbed his voice politely and offered no reply. He left the laptop recording and walked to the kitchen. The clock over the stove had stopped at 9:41, probably years ago. Probably the battery. He stood on a chair and lifted it down. The metal backplate was warm to the touch, too. Warm for a dead device. He pried it open with a butter knife. No battery inside. Just a coiled piece of copper wire soldered to the mechanism and a piece of notepaper folded into a neat square. He unfolded it carefully. 9:41 p.m. The walls exhaled. Emma had written, identical to the note in her logbook. Below it, 3 words pressed harder than the rest. It answered me. He sat on the counter, legs dangling, staring at the note, until the kitchen felt too loud with his own breathing. He slid off the counter and walked back to the hallway. The center mic was pointing at the floor now, as if it had drooped, but the stand was still tight. He raised it again. When he did, something clicked against his shoe. A memory card, the old micro SD type. He wouldn't have seen it if it hadn't been for the way the rain light shifted. He picked it up and turned it over. No label. He took it to the studio, slid it into the USB reader, and waited while the laptop blinked like it was, thinking. A single folder appeared. EM-RES 4. Inside, 5 files. The timestamps put them at late evening on the night Emma died. He felt his ribs contract, as if his body wanted to resist the shape of what was coming. He plugged in headphones and clicked the first file. Silence for 3 seconds. Then the soft thump of a cupboard closing, the whisper of wool against wood Emma's sweater, her breath, the small, almost apologetic exhale she always made before speaking aloud to no one, testing the room like a stage. "Okay," she said in the recording, very mild, very tired. "If I'm right, you can respond at low frequency. Just the way you did earlier." A pause. "I know you're not a person. I know you're not her, but you're something. So if you can, 1 sound for yes." The file hissed. The spectrum analyzer showed a slow wave around 35 hertzes, a belly-deep tone you felt more than heard. It swelled and faded, not like a heater kicking in, not like distant thunder. Intentional. He pinched the bridge of his nose, swallowing the word that wanted out. "Yes." Emma's voice lifted, a smile hiding in it. "Thank you." The sound that followed might have been a laugh or a sob. "Can you remember? Is that what this is? Are you the place where it goes when we stop?" She cut herself off. 1 sound for yes. The tone returned. He watched it like weather, wide and patient, as it rolled under her words. "Does Daniel hear you?" she asked after a while, her voice quieter. Silence this time. Then the tone again, but so faint the analyzer almost missed it. Not yes, not no, a shrug made of air. His throat tightened. He took off the headphones and listened to the empty room just to make sure the world still sounded like itself. When he put them back on, he skipped to the next file. Rain closer now, as if she'd moved to the open bedroom window. "I can't sleep," Emma whispered. "You're very loud tonight." She exhaled, and he felt that exhale in his spine. "If I close my eyes, it feels like someone standing where the wall is. That's stupid." A small laugh. I'm your God. I wish he were here. Paper rustled. The microphone bumped softly. Not like that. Not to fix it. Just so it's not just me. He paused the file and pressed his palm against the desk until the wood's resistance reminded him he was still tethered to something. He played the third. Shallow breathing. The kind that hurts but you pretend it doesn't. A glass on the nightstand. Her voice. Thinner. Dan, if you find this, a clatter as if she'd startled herself. No, that's not fair. That makes it a message when it's just a test. She coughed softly. One sound for yes. Are you listening now? The low wave rolled like an answer from the foundation. Okay, she said. Then please, if I can't sleep, keep me company. Silence. Or if you're a memory, be a kind one. Something creaked. Then, not in the recording, but behind Daniel, in the hallway. He took off the headphones and listened. A slow, deliberate pressure settling against old boards. The rain fixed itself to the windows in straight, thin lines. He turned back to the screen, finger hovering over the fourth file. He pressed it. He heard himself. Not in the room. In the recording. Muffled by distance, by a wall, maybe by a door cracked just enough. Hey, Em, his voice said. The gentleness it wore when he was trying to be kind and efficient at the same time. Try to rest. Okay? He didn't remember saying it. He didn't remember being here at the hour the file marked. In his head, that evening existed in fragments traffic. A late return, tea cooling untouched. An ache behind his eyes. The feeling of being one breath short of the right size. In the recording, Emma's breath had caught. Stay, she whispered. He heard himself hesitate. A sound like fingers on a doorframe. I'm just in the kitchen, past him answered. I'm not far. A long stretch of silence then, except the house wasn't silent. The spectral display bloomed briefly around 60 hertzes. A human voice region too low for words and too shaped to be anything but intention. It wasn't him. It wasn't Emma. It was a syllable made from wood and wire and weather, and when it faded, his voice returned to fill the space. Let go, Em, he heard himself say, soft as rain failing to be a whisper. Let it pass. The file ended in a click. The fifth file began immediately, no gap, no breath. Just the continuation the way a continuous thought refuses to respect track boundaries. In it, Emma's breath quickened, not with fear exactly, but with effort and frustration, and the terrible choreography of a body negotiating with itself. The low house tone rose again, nearer 40 hertzes this time, and layered beneath it, very faint, the sound of fabric moved by hands. Daniel took the headphones off as if they were a hot stove, and put both palms flat on the desk to steady himself. His hands left damp prints. Rain ticked at the glass with almost musical repetition. 3 light taps. A pause. 3 more. He stared down the hall toward the bedroom door and tried to remember the exact order of that last hour, but the sequence broke apart like chalk lines in weather. He told himself to stop listening. He reached for the laptop lid. Before he could close it, the bedroom mic track spiked hard. The monitors still muted, pulsed with green like breathing masks. The spectral display brightened in a column that wasn't rain and wasn't his body and wasn't the house settling. The shape of the sound was a hand pressed on a piano key that had no hammer. In the headphones, a whisper threaded the low tone, brittle with effort. Don't stay here, Daniel, Emma said in present tense. In this room, in this morning. Please. The sound cut mid-sentence, like breath held underwater. Daniel froze. listening for the follow-up that never came. The only thing moving in the room was the old reel machine. Its reels turned lazily, tape unspooling with a dry whisper. He hadn't loaded any tape. He unplugged everything at once. The sound died instantly, leaving only the weather. But the quiet wasn't relief. It felt like a pulse held between beats. He stepped into the hall and nearly tripped over a stack of boxes that hadn't been there before Emma's things he'd stored in the attic. A damp ring had formed beneath them, though the ceiling showed no leak. He crouched and peeled back the top lid. Inside were dozens of small cassette tapes labeled in her careful handwriting. Field Tests 0136. He remembered helping her carry these to the archive months before she died. He remembered throwing them away. The labels had swollen slightly from moisture, ink bleeding just enough to blur the edges of her letters. He took the first one and slipped it into the nearest player. The tape rolled for a few seconds before her voice filled the hall again, closer this time. Intimate, like she was leaning near his ear. "Test one," she whispered. "Interior resonance, hallway node. Daniel says I'm chasing ghosts, but ghosts chase us too, don't they?" A soft laugh, then the sound of her footsteps moving away, followed by the same low hum he'd heard last night. It's still answering. I think it knows the difference between noise and listening. He stopped the tape and put it down as if it could bite. The next box held more reels, notebooks, and a small wooden box lined with felt. Inside lay a fragment of microphone diaphragm, warped and blackened. He remembered that piece. It had exploded during one of her early tests when feedback overloaded the circuit. She had been furious at herself for pushing the levels too high. Now, holding it, he realized the surface looked almost organic, pitted like burned skin. Rain leaned harder against the windows. Somewhere, deep in the house, a door creaked open. He called out, "Mara?" But he knew the voice that would answer wasn't hers. The bedroom door stood half-closed again. The air beyond it carried a faint rhythm of breathing, steady, patient. He stepped closer, hand shaking on the frame. Inside, the mirror above the dresser had fogged over, though there was no heat source. Across its misted surface, words began to form, not written, but breathed. "Play it all." He staggered back, the sound of his heartbeat louder than the rain. He wanted to run, to leave the house to its whispers. But part of him, the part that still edited sound in his head, even in silence, needed to know the end of the recording, needed to understand what the house wanted to finish. He returned to the studio and pressed play on the fourth file again. The last moments unfolded slowly, his own voice repeating the words he'd tried not to remember. "Let go, Em. Let it pass." This time he didn't remove the rillers, headphones. He listened through the silence that followed. A faint scrape, fabric, then her voice, thinner than air. "You promised not to leave." He felt something shift behind him, an inhalation that belonged to no living throat. The monitor lights flickered, sinking to the rhythm. On the screen, a new waveform began to write itself in real time, though the microphones were off. It wasn't random. The shape was deliberate, rising and falling like breath. Underneath, a voice surfaced, not Emma's and not his, layered like multiple recordings played at once. "Do you remember what you did?" it asked. He tore the headphones off, but the voice continued without them, vibrating through the floorboards, through the window glass, through his own bones. The power flickered, dimmed, then steadied. He stared at the laptop. The timestamp on the recording software advanced by itself, logging seconds he hadn't lived yet. Another file saved automatically. RES 6 W-wave. When he opened it, the first sound was his own voice. present and breathing hard. "I didn't mean to," he heard himself say. "You were suffering." Then Emma answered, calm as sleep. "Mercy has a sound, Daniel. Do you hear it?" The file ended in static that dissolved into the house itself. Each wall a speaker, each nail a tuning fork. The rain outside faltered, thinned, then stopped completely. He walked into the hall. Every covered surface mirror, picture frame, window pane glimmered faintly, fogging as though the house exhaled in relief. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was waiting. Daniel stood there until the cold sank through his clothes. He knew the story wasn't finished. The house had more to say, and now it had his voice to say it with. Behind him, the recorder clicked itself on. "Test 7, his own voice announced. "Subject, confession," and the tape began to spin. The rain did not return that night. Instead, the air thickened until sound seemed to grate, move slower, dragging its feet through the dark. Daniel sat in the living room, lights off, a blanket pulled around his shoulders like armor. The recorder clicked softly somewhere in the house, steady, patient, almost polite. He'd stopped trying to trace the sound hours ago. Every time he moved, the house adjusted, the noise relocating to a new wall, a new corner, a new breath. He dozed sometime after midnight, but the dreams didn't belong to him. They were recordings replayed on a loop, Emma's hands calibrating microphones, her voice counting down in whispering tones, his own laughter echoing faintly before breaking into a sound that wasn't laughter at all. When he jerked awake, dawn was trying to pry its fingers through the curtains, and the recorder was sitting on the coffee table in front of him. Its red light blinked. He hadn't brought it down from the studio. The display showed a new file name. House. Final. Wave. He didn't press play. He told himself he wouldn't. Instead, he made coffee, turned on every light, opened the curtains. He even turned the radio on for company soft jazz that felt absurdly human. But the recorder waited. The red light kept pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to die. He tried to distract himself by packing. His suitcase lay open, half full of clothes that suddenly seemed to belong to someone else. When he reached for the last shirt, a whisper rose from the recorder, so faint he almost mistook it for wind. "Daniel." He turned slowly. The recorder wasn't blinking anymore. It was solid red. The radio crackled, the saxophone dissolving into white noise, and from the static, Emma's voice rose clear, as if she'd hijacked every frequency in the room. "Play it," she said. "If you ever loved me, play it." He picked the recorder up with shaking hands and pressed play. At first, only static, then footsteps his. Measured, heavy, deliberate. He heard the creak of the bedroom floorboards, the soft wheeze of an open window. Emma's breathing came next, irregular but alive. And then, his voice. "Let go, Em." The sound wasn't distorted this time. He could hear everything, the exhaustion in his throat, the gentle insistence, the way he believed he was helping. Then the shift of fabric, the small thud of a pillow meeting skin, her muffled gasp, his own voice trembling. "It's okay. It's okay." The sound of rain, sudden and violent, like applause. And then silence, the same kind of silence that had followed him ever since. He stopped the playback and dropped the recorder. It landed face up, still spinning, the tape winding itself backward. He backed away, shaking his head, whispering no, 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 under his breath. But the speakers in every room began to hum, feeding the sound through the walls like veins carrying confession. Emma's voice filled the house again, not weak this time, but clear. "Do you remember what I said, Dan? About the house? Listening?" It doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It just plays us back until we hear what we really are. He clutched the doorway, the air vibrating around him like a low note from a cello. The photos on the walls trembled. Glasses shivered in their cupboards. He shouted her name, pleaded for it to stop, but the sound only grew stronger, his voice, her voice, the house's hum weaving together until they were indistinguishable. Then everything stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was final. The air felt heavier, cleaner, as if the confession itself had vacuumed the space of lies. The red light on the recorder went dark. Daniel sank to his knees, palms pressed to the floorboards. They were warm, almost pulsing. Somewhere below him, the house exhaled, long relieved, like lungs unclenching after years of holding a secret. He didn't know how long he stayed like that. When he finally looked up, dawn had filled the windows with pale gold. The house looked ordinary again, smaller, even gentle. The machines in the studio were still. The air didn't hum. For the first time since Emma's death, it wasn't listening. Or maybe it had already heard everything it needed. He stood, dizzy from exhaustion, and walked to the doorway. He could leave now. He could get in the car, drive until the sea was only memory. But something stopped him, the faintest sound, barely there, like breathing at rest. He turned toward the bedroom. The door was open. Inside, the mirror was uncovered, sunlight sliding across its surface. For a moment, he saw only his reflection, hollow-eyed, unshaven, alive. Then another image surfaced faintly behind him. Emma, lying peaceful in bed, her chest rising and falling in rhythm with the rain's remembered cadence. She wasn't accusing him. She wasn't afraid. She was just there, as if the house had finally chosen to play something gentle. Daniel stepped forward, reached out, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The mirror didn't answer. But the rain outside began again, soft, forgiving, endless, and in that sound, somewhere between thunder and memory, he thought he heard her say very quietly, "I know." The house listened once more. Then, for the first time, it let him go. By the next morning, the road was washed out. A storm had come overnight, fierce enough to erase the lane markings and fold the coastline into fog. Daniel stood on the porch, suitcase by his feet, staring at what used to be the only way out. The rain had stopped, but the mist clung to the trees like smoke from something still burning. He'd made up his mind before sunrise. He would leave the keys under the mat, lock the door, and walk if he had to. But now the path was gone, just a stretch of gray that looked bottomless. The house loomed behind him, quiet, patient. He could feel its stillness like eyes at his back. He told himself not to look. He did anyway. Through the open curtains of the studio window, he saw the light on. A warm glow, steady, deliberate. He hadn't turned anything on since last night. He whispered, "No." But his body betrayed him. His feet moved toward the door, each step heavier than the last. When he entered the house, the air shifted. It didn't hum anymore. It breathed. On the desk in the studio sat the recorder, lid open, empty reels, turning slowly as if waiting for tape. Next to it lay a new cassette, black, unlabeled, and warm. He hadn't owned blank cassettes in years. He didn't touch it. The laptop screen blinked awake by itself, displaying a single folder. Archive continued. Inside were 3 files. Their timestamps predated Emma's death by 40 years. He frowned, opening the first one. A man's voice filled the room, older, fragile, threaded with static. "If this is being played, I've failed to finish the archive. My name is Harold Sloan. caretaker of this property since 1962. This is my record of the phenomenon. The word phenomenon broke into static, then reformed as the sound of shallow breathing. Each occupant leaves an imprint, the man continued, his voice shaking. The walls don't keep secrets, they store them. Sometimes they replay. A click, sometimes they rewrite. Daniel stared at the speakers, throat dry. Harold Sloan. The name tugged at something faintly familiar. He rifled through Emma's old notes and found it scrawled on a margin. Sloan tapes, ask archives in town. She'd known. She'd heard him too. He opened the second file. A woman's voice this time, faint, as if from underwater. I hear them every night, Mr. Sloan. My husband says it's the sea. But the sea doesn't whisper in your own voice. A pause. He leaves in the morning. I think the house likes him more than it likes me. Then, low under her words, the same tone Emma had recorded the 35 hertz's pulse that felt like a heartbeat trapped under the floorboards. He pressed pause, heart hammering. The pattern was identical, decades apart. He scrolled to the last file. This one began with laughter. Children, two voices, high and bright. A man called out, "Come inside." Then the crash of glass. Screams. The recording hissed out, replaced by the unmistakable rhythm of breathing. Not human, too deep, too slow. And then the same man's voice returned, older now, barely a whisper. It remembers mercy. That's what it wants. Mercy and confession. The file ended. Daniel sat in silence, hands gripping the edge of the desk. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, white and heavy. He realized he could no longer hear the sea. He unplugged the laptop, the speakers, everything, and stuffed the recorder and cassette into his coat pocket. If the house had a history, he would find the record of it somewhere that didn't breathe. He grabbed his suitcase and stepped outside into the fog. The world beyond the porch was unrecognizable shapes, dissolving into gray. He could still see the faint line of the gravel drive, so he followed it, suitcase wheels crunching softly. Half a mile down, the fog cleared enough for him to see the old caretaker's shack near the tree line. He'd always assumed it was storage for tools. The padlock hung broken. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint metallic smell of magnetic tape. Shelves lined every wall, stacked with reels labeled in neat handwriting. 1,958, 1,962, 1,975, 1,984. He picked one at random and held it up to the light. Written in red ink, Harold Sloan room tone, 9:41 p.m. 9:41. The same hour Emma had written, the hour the house exhaled. He slid the reel into an old playback deck on the workbench and turned the crank until it clicked. The speakers came alive with a sound he knew too well, breathing. But beneath it, something else, a rhythm he could almost translate. 3 slow breaths, 2 fast, pause, 1 long exhale. He frowned, counting it out on his fingers. It wasn't random. It was Morse. He scribbled the pattern in his notebook, decoding as best he could. The message emerged, incomplete, but clear enough to steal the air from his chest. Not the first. The deck stopped abruptly. The silence that followed felt alive, like an ear pressed against the other side of a confession booth. Daniel backed toward the door, heart slamming against his ribs. Behind him, another machine started spinning on its own. Then another. One by one, reels along the walls came to life, their spools turning. the room filling with overlapping whispers. Different voices, hundreds of them, pleading, confessing, crying. Some repeated phrases he recognized. "Let go. I'm sorry. It was mercy. Please stop." The sound grew until it felt physical, vibrating through the floor, the walls, his bones. He clamped his hands over his ears, but the voices pushed through. The air itself was the recording now. The shack trembled as though the foundation were groaning under the weight of everything it had ever heard. "Enough!" he shouted. "I understand!" The machines stopped, all of them. The silence afterward was so sudden it made him stumble. Dust hung in the air, settling like snow. Only one reel still turned, slow, deliberate, whispering through static. Emma's voice, impossibly woven into it. "You can't take it with you, Dan. You can only add to it." The tape snapped, ending the sound like a heartbeat breaking. Daniel dropped the recorder and ran. By the time he reached the main road, the fog had thinned. The house stood visible on the hill behind him, small and still. From this distance it looked harmless, just wood and glass and shadow. He could almost believe he'd imagined everything. He turned toward town, ready to keep walking until the air smelled of gasoline instead of rain. But as he reached the curve, the recorder in his pocket clicked on again, unprompted. A new file name appeared on its small display. Resident 7. He didn't stop walking. He couldn't. The fog thinned into drizzle by the time Daniel reached the first gas station. It stood at the edge of the old road like something left behind when the town moved on. One flickering light, a rusted Coke machine, a faded map of the coast nailed to the wall. The attendant looked up from a crossword when Daniel entered, the small brass bell over the door giving a tired jingle. "You walked through that?" the man asked, eyeing Daniel's soaked coat. "Car stuck back up the hill," Daniel lied. "I need directions into town." The man shrugged, pointed to the road curving inland. "About 5 miles. Can't miss it. You staying at the old Mariner place?" Daniel froze. "Why?" The attendant scratched his chin, pencil still in hand. "Nobody's used that house in years. Last caretaker was some engineer fella. Before that, a professor and his wife. You sure it's safe up there? Folks say the wiring hums like bees even with the power." Daniel almost laughed. Hums like bees. He bought a thermos of coffee and left. The drizzle had turned to mist again by the time he started walking. Each step carried a faint echo, like the ground remembering him. Town appeared gradually. A church steeple first, then rows of weathered houses, and a single main street that looked like it hadn't updated since the 70s. He found the archive building at the end, a narrow stone structure with tall windows and a plaque that read Mariner Historical Society. Inside, the air smelled of paper and mildew. A woman behind the counter looked up with polite curiosity. Her name tag said Evelyn. "I'm looking for old audio records," Daniel said, his voice rasping from the cold. "Harold Sloan. 1,960 seconds, maybe?" She frowned thoughtfully. "Sloan, caretaker of the coastal property, wasn't he? We do have a few of his reels in the basement. He donated them before he disappeared. Disappeared. Walked out during a storm and never came back. That was, 78, I think." Her casual tone made the words worse somehow. She motioned for him to follow. The basement stairs creaked under their weight, the light dimming with each step. At the bottom, the smell of metal and damp concrete greeted them. Rows of cabinets stretched into the dark. She stopped at one marked Audio Personal Collections. Inside, dozens of reels sat in neat stacks. Daniel recognized the handwriting on several labels, the same precise script from the caretaker's shack. Evelyn selected a box labeled SLON Restricted, and set it on the table. "These were never cataloged publicly," she said. "Most are just ambient recordings, but a few, well, they make people uneasy." She threaded the first reel onto an old player, then turned the knob. The speakers hissed, then filled with the sound of wind and low, rhythmic breathing. Daniel felt the skin on his arms tighten. "That's the house," he murmured. "What?" He leaned closer. "That's not wind. It's the house. The walls breathe." Evelyn shot him a quick glance, but said nothing. The tape crackled, and a new voice joined a child's, faint and distant. "Can I go outside now, Mr. Sloan?" Then Harold's weary reply, "Not yet. The house is recording." The child laughed softly. Then a sound like static folding inward filled the room, and the tape cut to silence. Evelyn reached to stop it, but Daniel caught her wrist. "Play another." She hesitated, then loaded the next reel. This one began with the familiar tone, that deep, subsonic pulse. Then a woman's voice different from before, older, uncertain. "Harold, it's getting louder. Every night at 9:41. The air changes, the floor creaks like someone walking, but it's not footsteps, it's breath. I hear them in my dreams now. They ask for mercy." The voice dissolved into static again, but the low pulse remained, vibrating the table. The metal drawer handles rattled softly. Evelyn backed away. "Maybe we should stop. These tapes aren't stable." Daniel pressed his palms flat against the table to steady it. "What happens at 9:41? "I don't know," she said. "That's just what they all mention. Some resonance thing, maybe. Why?" Her question broke off when the lights flickered. The hum in the room deepened until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen glowed with a new file notification, Resident 8, Way Away. Evelyn frowned. "What's that?" He didn't answer. His fingers trembled as he tapped play. The phone's speaker emitted faint static. Then his own voice recorded only seconds earlier. "Play another," it said. Evelyn's eyes widened. "That's you," the sound repeated, layering on itself. "Play another. Play another." The old tape reels started to spin without being touched, their spools turning in sync with the echo. "Stop them," Evelyn whispered. "I can't." The hum thickened into something deeper, a chorus of breaths overlapping until they formed words. Not English, something older, vowel-heavy, mechanical and alive. The room grew colder, papers fluttered. Then all at once, silence. Every reel stopped. The air went still. Evelyn whispered, "Did you hear that?" Daniel swallowed. "It said my name." Her mouth opened to respond. But before she could, the power failed. The basement plunged into darkness. Only Daniel's phone screen glowed faintly, and on it, text scrolled across the audio app as though typed by unseen fingers. "Bring US back." The reels started again, but this time they didn't play, they spoke. Voices old and new, hundreds overlapping, whispering the same phrase. "Bring us back." Evelyn grabbed his arm, terrified. "Turn it off." "I can't," he shouted, over the roar of static. "It's not the machines, it's the building." The floor began to shake. Dust rained from the ceiling. In the dark, shapes moved, thin silhouettes cast by no light at all. Evelyn screamed. Daniel pulled her toward the stairs, but the door at the top slammed shut with a sound that wasn't wood. It was breath exhaled violently. "Run!" he yelled, though there was nowhere to go. The air itself was moving, swirling around them, every breath the house had ever stolen coming back at once. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Light returned. The reels spun idly, harmless now. Evelyn leaned against the wall, shaking. What was that? Daniel stared at the glowing reels, his own reflection warped in their metallic curves. That, he said quietly, was everything it ever heard asking to be remembered. He picked up one of the reels, the oldest, dated 1958, and slipped it into his coat pocket. If the house was listening, maybe it wanted its stories finished. And maybe, for that to happen, someone had to play them all. He turned toward the stairs, the sound of his own footsteps, echoing in triplets, once from his boots, once from the concrete, and once more, fainter, from somewhere still recording. He reached the edge of town by afternoon, the drizzle combing the air into thin strands. The road up the hill was clear now, a dark ribbon cutting through wet grass. He could have turned the other way and kept walking until the house was a rumor again, but the reel in his pocket felt heavier with every step. "Bring us back," the texts had said. Maybe the only way out was through. The house waited where he left it, smaller in daylight, almost apologetic. He paused on the porch and laid his palm against the door. The wood was cool, not humming, but he could feel the shape of the silence on the other side. Not empty, held. He set the keys on the sill. He didn't need them. The door opened at his touch. The rooms shivered with the draft, a sound like brushed cymbals fading. No lights flickered. No machines spun on their own. Every breath he took came back to him in a softer version, the way a church returns a prayer as air. He went first to the studio. He pulled the blinds and let the room find its night. On the desk, he lined up the old reels. Harold's 1958 room tone, the caretaker's 941, the woman who heard the sea as whispers. He added Emma's folders to the array, arranging them in chronological order by the careful handwriting she'd left him. He placed the unlabeled black cassette in the center like a coin on a tongue. He wired microphones where the walls had sounded fullest, mapped the resonance nodes exactly as Emma had, then added what she had not: 2 contact transducers gaffer-taped to beams beneath the floor. He ran cables like arteries to the interface, tested the playback chain twice, left the laptop lid open. On the console, he labeled the master fader with a strip of tape and wrote in pen, "Exhale." He checked the clock on the stove out of habit, then caught himself. No battery sat inside. It still read 9:41. He placed it face down on the counter like a note under a glass. By dusk, the rain had returned, gentle as breath through a cotton sheet. He made tea and didn't drink it. He cleaned the glass on the bedroom mirror and left the door ajar. He took the recorder from his pocket and set it at the hall's midpoint, where every footstep multiplied itself by 2. The little screen stayed dark. He was grateful for that. He was also afraid of it. The first sound he played wasn't a voice. It was Harold's room tone, a long, patient ocean of air. At low volume, barely above the room's own hush, he let it swell until the floorboards agreed with it. He watched the spectrum. The familiar belly of 35 hertzes formed like a weather front and settled, docile as an old dog taking its place. Then he layered the second tape, Harold again. Older, the pulse deepening, the house clearing its throat. He leaned closer to the monitors until he could tell where the walls themselves were singing. He brought the contact transducers in slowly, sending a mirror of the sound back into the structure, not to cancel it, not yet, but to hold it steady the way you hum along to find a pitch that won't slip. The house listened. At 9:39, he added the woman's tape. Her voice rippled through the frequencies like a hand in water. "It's louder every night," she said to a man decades gone, and the beam above Daniel's head answered her with a small, almost fond creak. He thought of Emma's margin note. It answered me. He thought of the town archive breathing in the dark. "Bring us back." He threaded Emma's first file and watched his hand shake without interfering. Her field tests, her laughter that always sounded like she was apologizing to the air for taking up space in it. The waveform bloomed. The rain changed its pattern to match. 3 light taps and a pause, the house's old code returning. He turned up the transducers 1 notch and felt the floor take the note like a lung, receiving a final, deliberate breath. At 9:41, the house exhaled. It wasn't dramatic. No lights blew, no doors slammed.